have them dive into Domestic Violence Day because we only got to the end of the Tough Guys.
Yeah.
And then we'll discuss the homework together at the end of class today. How about that? Okay, everything that covers about the intro to domestic violence, what's domestic violence, stuff like that, will all be covered in today's class. Okay? All right, so I'll let them take it off. We should have a packed whole night tonight, so.
Did you guys get the power and control wheel? Did Trisha
The blank one?
No.
Okay.
You guys didn't get a power and control wheel.
Oh, is it already like hard to kind of find it?
It is in the binder.
I filled that one. Don't you guys have like a blank notes section?
Yeah.
Just draw that out.
So we're gonna go through, what they are, so you guys can write them down before you look at the filled-in one.
Yeah, totally. Good. Awesome. So I'm Cassie, and this is Eileen. And like Andrea said, we're part of the prevention program with Tahoe Safe Alliance. So there is 5 of us. So yeah, you met Trisha and Emily, and then Kate. I think you'll meet for the mental health first aid awareness day. And so I first wanted to kind of just start off with like a debriefing from, would that have been on Thursday when you guys watched Tough Guys?
Yes.
Yeah, Thursday. So I just wanted to do like a little debriefing about Thursday. Have any questions or thoughts come up since the movie? How did you guys like the movie? It's like one of my favorite documentaries. But it is pretty intense. It brings up some stuff. So didn't know if you guys debriefed or thought any more about it over the weekend that you guys want to share.
I was wondering if you show that to youth.
Yeah, so it's not in our everyday presentations that we show, but for example, like we have leadership clubs in both Truckee and North Tahoe High School, and we'll share it, sometimes with them, or do like a movie showing to the community or other schools. We also do youth empowerment groups that are like 10-week programs. We meet once a week for 10 weeks, and the kind of students that counselors have picked for whatever reason to kind of come together and talk a little bit more about things. And depending on the group and the maturity that the group has, we'll show it in there. There's one that's very similar called The Mask You Live In, which is very similar concept to Tough Guys, and but potentially could be shown to a little younger audience, so sometimes we'll play that in some of the youth empowerment groups as well.
It's not normally showed after, like it's middle school and higher. In middle school, you'll kind of edit out super graphic parts.
Yeah.
I witnessed as I was growing up, especially all the, the real masculine movies, Tough Guy, and the little, the little woman, and the man of the house and all that kind of stuff. So like, it was heavy.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very heavy, but it was so honest.
Yeah, that's a good way to categorize it.
Yeah, I think we can discuss it here. Is we had our own experience with a suburban gang over in El Dorado Hills that was very violent, and they attacked our younger son, and he ended up in the hospital. And we filed charges against the gang. They were 5 or 6 years older, and he was a sophomore in high school, and this gang went around and they basically just intimidated and terrorized pretty much all of El Dorado Hills. And so we pressed charges, and there had been people press charges before, but they always dropped them because the gang would basically threaten their lives, which they did to us as well as our son. So we actually left El Dorado Hills and moved across country on the the Victim Protection Act, and they went to jail. So, but it was an interesting thing because they most of them were from upper class families, and they had been so amazingly programmed from what was going on that time. They were sort of these kind of suburban thugs. They really wanted to be like Crips or Blood or whatever, and they were just confused. And I could see at the trial and whatnot, you could look at them and realize that they were just going the wrong direction, but they had very much been, I believe, at the effect of the culture in which they were raised in, and so so it was very, very meaningful for me to watch that. And
you could make some connections.
You can absolutely see why that is such a major challenge we have in this country as a whole. The culture, that part of the culture is very disturbed and sick.
Totally.
It was very, very strange because the whole experience, they have these rich kids, their parents were divorced, and they just didn't track what was going on with them or what they were doing. They just kept giving them money and letting them do whatever. But when we flew back for the court appearance, the younger brother, and I won't name names, but the younger brother they were all up on the balcony, and we were down below talking to our lawyer. And the younger brother kind of throws himself over the side of the balcony and goes, "Bleh," acts like he's throwing up all over us.
Oh.
I mean, real classy. And but then afterward, after I read my letter about the whole experience and how really deeply troubling it was all the way around. The two that actually ended up going to prison came up crying and just saying we are really, really, really sorry. We didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Yeah. Sometimes we don't recognize that our actions have consequences.
I felt like it was really, really insightful. It was an interesting point of view to hear, you hear the blame on the media all the time and the violent video games, and I think everybody's really quick to react to that and not really think critically about it. But I found the point that, women are exposed to the same thing. Why aren't we shooting up in schools, and that sort of thing? But on the same level, watching that, I think also made me feel more compassionate towards the male counterpart, instead of being like, you guys are the antagonists, the instigators, whatever else, that it's just kind of like, I feel really shitty for you guys because, we have our gender roles that we're pigeonholed into, and you guys have yours, and yours just happen to be super aggressive, and that's got to be really, really hard to handle.
Totally, yeah, I totally connect with that. It's like, I feel we have our woman box that is hard and lots of stigmas on it, but men do too, and a lot of the times they don't get talked about and they don't get looked at, and sometimes men even have bigger stigmas than women do when they need to fit into that box, and when they step out of it, that anxiety and stress that I can only imagine comes from that. So yeah, I totally recognize
it's
that.
It's a strong current to swim against. The culture of it. You look at that and you just,
that box
I know just having 3 sons, we had to be pretty vigilant because they were continually exposed to that all the time. They wanted to play Grand Theft Auto, and they wanted to go to R-rated movies where there was just nothing but violence from the beginning to end. And we wouldn't let them, certainly until they were 16 years old, 17, out of the house and whatnot. But that's hard because their whole peer group, I mean,
totally.
Good kids, intermediate kids, the kids that are more challenged and whatnot, they're all exposed to it. Mm-hmm. So it requires a lot of input and vigilance and continued communication with your kids on the part of the parents. But if you don't have parents, because they're split up or whatever, it's hard to be able to negotiate that. It's a real challenge. I have great compassion for it.
Yeah, and pressures at any age are hard, but I feel like peer pressure in your high school age when you're really trying to define who you are, those are pretty strong and intense. We talk about pressure or coercion, same thing, and in high school they're intense. I mean, high school wasn't that long ago, but long enough to where sometimes I forget about those pressures, but they were still there and intense and real, and really hard to cope with if we don't have those healthy coping skills. So something that the prevention team strongly, a motto that we go by is, violence is a learned behavior, therefore it can be unlearned. And I strongly believe that as well. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here, talking about and educating about it. And so today Eileen and I will be talking a little bit more about intimate partner violence and kind of talk about some stalking and end on healthy relationships, because we always like to end on a positive. So that's kind of what the outline will look like today. And so I first wanted to just go over the definition of intimate partner violence. You guys might have it on a handout, but I'm also going to write it down just so you can visibly see it if you can't find it on there. So it's when one person repeatedly, let me spell this right. Oops, I already spelled it wrong. abusing another in an intimate relationship in order to establish and maintain power and control. So, when you read this definition, what are some key words that stick out to you? So, intimate partner violence. One person repeatedly abusing another in an intimate relationship in order to establish and maintain power and control. What are some key words? What are some key words that stick out to you?
Yep.
Power. Power and control.
Yep.
Repeatedly. Any others that stick out for you? Abusing.
Intimate relationship.
Yeah, totally. In order for it to be intimate partner violence, it has to be repeated. If it's a one-time act, that's obviously still an assault, an attack, but it has to be continuous to fall under the category of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. And then intimate relationship, why do you think we've made, or we're starting to make that sort of culture shift from domestic violence to intimate partner violence? Why do you think that shift is starting to be made, not be old?
Because there are all kinds of partnerships.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a big assumption when we say domestic violence is a lot of people think what?
Husband, wife, boyfriend,
Married
girlfriend,
couple.
boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah. So a lot of times that people think of like husband and wife, right? But what else? What other relationships can be intimate?
Boyfriend, girlfriend.
Yeah. So whether you're married or not.
Roommates.
Yes. Oops. So it doesn't have to be male, female. Also roommates. You're spending a lot of time. Roommates can be categorized into that. Any others that can be categorized into that? Intimate.
Family members.
Yeah. So if it's anyone under the age of 18, then that's categorized into child abuse when it comes to the family. But yes, like an aunt or uncle, or like a mom and an uncle, or like family members who are living together, definitely. What about if you're divorced and have kids, or even if you don't have kids? Yeah, definitely. So yeah, divorce and kids. Any others that can be categorized into intimate relationship?
Would it be elderly, like if you're a caregiver and caring for your parent?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, definitely categorized into that like family category, but absolutely, yeah. Good example. So we're kind of making that shift to intimate partner violence instead of domestic violence because we're wanting to make it be known that it's circumferencing a lot of different relationships than just a husband and wife. And then the power and control, you guys know probably every CIT presentation you have, power and control will probably come up because it's a big part of why violence happens in our community. So those are, that's the definition of intimate partner violence. And then we asked you guys to write on your notes this sort of diagram. So this is, we're going to talk about the different types of abuse. So there are 8 different types that we use in our presentations about relating to intimate partner violence. So what do you think are some different types of abuse?
Physical.
Physical, yeah. And if you guys want to, on that wheel, kind of write the types kind of up on the side or even on the side of it, because we're going to do an activity where you guys are going to write a little bit on this. So yeah, so physical abuse, that is probably the most obvious, it's the most visible. Punching, kicking, tripping, all of those are tied into that physical. And even something like if you're physically putting yourself in front of like a doorway so someone can't leave, that's categorized into that physical abuse category. If you're physically not letting someone leave a room when they want to, that's also a type in that physical abuse. And what are some other types you think?
Verbal.
Yeah? So verbal, that's the yelling, the put downs, anything verbal. What are some other ones? Did you have another one, Raina, or was yours the verbal one that you had? Or did you have another type that you were gonna? No, good. Emotional?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we categorize that under mental and emotional. But yes. And we'll come back and talk about that. What about any other types that you can think of?
Financial.
Yep. Absolutely. And what do you think financial abuse could look like? Should I call that one?
You give your wife a budget and an allowance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not allowing your partner to have a job. They need to stay home and take care of the house, take care of the kids. You can't work. I'm going to be the one that brings home the money. And again, it's all about that balance, right? If they want to be a stay-at-home mom, then that's their choice, and that's a great choice. But as long as they've had a mutual conversation about that, it's when they're not having a mutual conversation about it and one person is forcing it upon another person where it becomes that abuse or unhealthy side of things. Any others that you guys can think of?
Sexual?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we spent a whole 2 days on the sexual abuse category too. So, but can you be sexually assaulted if you're married? Can your husband or wife rape you? Absolutely. So even if you're in a loving and committed relationship, if you're not wanting to partake in sexual acts and it's forced upon you, whether you're married or not, that's still sexual abuse or rape or assault. And
That was only considered illegal in 2001.
yeah, that just changed. Yeah. Pretty crazy. How about, I'll give you an example. If you didn't wear that outfit, I wouldn't have had to hit you.
Blame.
Absolutely. So that's putting the act on someone else. It's not that perpetrator's fault, it's the victim's fault. So if you wouldn't have done this, if you wouldn't have talked to that boy, if you wouldn't have dressed a certain way, I wouldn't have had to do this abuse to you. I don't want to be this mean, abusive person. I love you, but if you didn't do these things, I wouldn't have to abuse you. So it's really taking that consequence for their actions and putting it onto someone else, which it's never the victim's fault if abuse is happening to them. And let's see, what are we forgetting? Isolation is one. And what do you think isolation could look like?
You can't leave the house.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have any friends.
Can't have any
You
friends.
can't have a phone.
Can't have a phone or
Wi-Fi password.
can't have the Wi-Fi password. Yeah, there was even a case that we had where the person would check the mileage on their car, and if if the mileage increased during they were at work, then that person would get in trouble. So isolating them to the point where they couldn't even leave the house, and to the extreme that they were checking the mileage to make sure that they weren't.
Do you guys remember in Morgan Snyder's video when she said they left the city, he quit his job and left the city and moved to like a country town, things like that? That's another form of isolation, taking you out of an area that you're comfortable with and putting you in a different area where you have no friends, no family, you don't know resources, you don't know where the
isolating you
local
from
hospital
your-
is, things like that.
Yeah, so from your support system, maybe you were together in a relationship where you had family and friends around, and they want to move you, isolate you from any support group that you might have, to where then if you did want to reach out, you wouldn't know the resources or have that friend or family connection that you had in your old town. So I'd say that's a pretty common one, more common than people think probably. And then for different ones, so like for an example for high school, we'll categorize cyber into this, but there's a lot of different other ones. There's social, which could be excluding from friend groups. If you break up with me, all of our friends are gonna take my side. You're not gonna have any more friends anymore. And then we also, in the high school presentation, have cyber be one. So, it can anything through text messages, demanding passwords, constantly checking up, calling, texting, where are you, what are you doing, who are you with, 24/7. So some of those are the categories as the other one. So I'll put other here, and I'll add like cyber and social. So those are some other examples of ones that we have that we use in the high school presentations. For the high school, we typically will mention the financial, but it won't be a component because typically it's a little older when that financial component will get into factor.
Is this just only about abusing one person, or is it technically considered abuse if you abuse people or animals or other things related to the person?
So yeah, so you're saying if like you're in a relationship and someone like abuses the pet?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So that is definitely a form of abuse. We probably like categorize it under mental and emotional in this category, or physical and mental and emotional. So that's why we always have mental and emotional and come back to that, because if it's not categorized in this, then any abuse that's being put onto you, do you think it's going to affect your mental and emotional state? Absolutely, right? So that kind of circumferences all the rest that can happen.
And that includes, children.
Right, yeah.
People abusing children to get back at somebody, or just abusing children in the first place. We see it with animals. We see it with older grandparents, things like that. Anybody that has a connection to the person that they really want to put this power and control over can be used as manipulation
to gain that power and control, right? It's we always talk about that when in the high school student, and you'll hear this more when you guys do the activity that we're going to do in a second. But if you think of this as like a bicycle spoke, and the middle is that like power and control, the more spokes you have, like the faster the bike goes, right? Not like 100% sure on biking and all that stuff, but that's what I've heard anyway, that it's like better the more spokes. Anyway, so it's like the more abuse someone might be putting on you, the more power start little with maybe like a put down, and then they're gonna add, eventually as a cycle and it continues, there's gonna be more types and it might be more intense too, that the abuse is happening, and it's all about that power and control, to maintain and establish that power and control. Yeah, so we're gonna do an activity called in their own words, and it's gonna be kind of talking about, it's gonna take you through the life of someone who's in an unhealthy or abusive relationship. So before I dive too much into the directions of the game, does anyone have any questions about the types? Any clarification on any of them?
Do you guys ever explore like all the different types of crisis as well? Not just like the violence types, but like the different types of crisis that is created out of kind of violence?
Talking more about like mental illness and stuff, or?
Yeah.
Like the repercussions of the trauma?
Yeah, like just kind of more about like crises in general. Like, I don't know, I guess if someone's a victim of one act of violence, that's a crisis for them, but it's not repetitive, violence type stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely spend time talking about the overlap of, all oppressions or isms, how they all relate. And then we definitely spend time talking about self-care. So self-care from any trauma or crisis. How do we manage and cope with our state of well-being in a healthy and positive way? So when we are faced with a crisis, how can we get back to that mentally well state in a healthy way, basically like positive coping mechanisms and skills and stuff. So we spend almost a whole day in the high school presentations with that, and then definitely in like our youth empowerment groups and leadership clubs and stuff, we spend a lot of time focusing on that.
And we'll get into more, like, I heard repetitive, so we'll get into more of that in like sexual assault, sexual harassment weeks, the 2 days that we do it, because like sexual harassment, it has to be repetitive. Sexual assault is the one assault. So there is different types that doesn't have to be repetitive as well, that still can cause trauma. So it's not, one is not more traumatic than the other, I guess.
Okay, so this activity, like I said, is called In Their Own Words, and we'll probably break you off into groups of 3 and 4. Some of you guys might have a group of 3 and a 4, and we're going to give you a character card. And so what your group is going to do is you're going to read the character card, learn a little bit about your character. So for example, this is Sandra. So you're going to learn a little bit about Sandra. And then at the end, it's going to tell you some place to go. And so outside on the hallway, probably when you came in, you probably noticed a whole bunch of colorful things all out in the hallway. And so this one says, for example, go to Abuse Happens. And pick up card number 1. So in the middle, there's going to be a white card that has different categories. And around it, there's going to be a whole bunch of colors. So if you have purple, what color do you think you're going to pick up on the Abuse Happens category?
Orange.
Purple, yeah. And so keep the character card, but when you go to the different stations, read what it says, decide where you're going to go next, and then put the card down because it makes it a lot easier for us when we're cleaning it up. So just hold on to your character card, but the rest, read as a group, decide where you're going to go, and put it back down. Some of them, when you go to a certain station, it'll ask you to choose. Either go to Abuse Happens number 2 or go to Finances number 4. So as a group, you guys need to come up with what path you're going to go to, and really put yourself into Sandra's shoes. And not like what you would want her to do, but knowing the information that you have, what Sandra would have done in that situation. So really trying to put yourself into his or her shoes. And let's see, am I forgetting anything? It'll tell you when it ends. It'll say that the story has ended for now, and then you guys can come back in and kind of discuss the different types of abuse that have happened.
Yeah, maybe
Saying it's like choose your own adventure.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, choose your own path.
maybe fill in those blank boxes, just like something that you saw of, for example, financial abuse. Just say, Sandra's partner kept money away from her, something like that, so that you can remember what went through, because there's gonna be a lot of different types of abuse, and it's gonna happen consecutively, or not consecutively, repeatedly.
Okay, let's see.
What blank boxes?
Oh, if you guys wrote on this on your notes or whatever, if you have a space to
So
write.
bring it with us.
Yeah.
Or when you
Sorry.
come back, you can do it when you come back too. Either
Or
way.
just, you don't even have to make the wheel if you don't want to. If you just want to write it down.
Okay, so there's gonna be
And one more thing.
Yeah.
What is the objective? Like awareness or
the objective of the game.
thinking of how a victim thinks?
Yeah, just kind of putting yourself in their shoes, hearing their story,
Practice
getting their
thinking like a victim.
Yeah, so this activity is to show you that the different systems that victims have to go through to get justice, to get connected to resources, what they face when they turn to families, things like that. So if you've never been in their shoes themselves as a victim, this gives you an opportunity to kind of read their story, see what path they chose, but by you choosing them, and then seeing what barriers they were faced, right? What happened when they went to court? What happened when they went to the friends? What happened when they went to clergy? Things like that normal victims face every day. So, yep.
You guys will have like 30 to 45 minutes. It takes quite a bit of time to go around.
So I think there'll be 2 groups of 4 and 2 groups of 3.
You could call it the first second. No problem.
What's next? Now we have a choice, guys.
All right, what are we gonna do?
If you want to talk to the priest, go to clergy. She's if you want to call the local domestic violence program.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
That's what I would do.
Well, if I were her, I would go to clergy because she says she loves it when a priest comes
But you
to
are
visit.
her. What do you want to do?
Then I would call my priest. I would do that. It's just a little.
But like saying it was you.
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not religious, so I would go with the other one.
All right, let's go with the other.
Let's go with the other one. I don't want to go to the
be in her
clergy.
world,
Me
though.
neither.
But aren't we supposed to be in her world?
Well, maybe.
I mean,
she's
like,
just
you're
religious.
supposed to step into them.
Yeah.
But I think we have a choice, though. You
Times
know what I
of
mean?
crisis, though, don't you go to your priest?
I think we got them all.
So I'll give you about like a minute to wrap up your thoughts about your story, and then we'll kind of debrief as a whole together.
I know.
For you guys.
Mad cool.
Maggie. So some intense emotions definitely come up to it. Any other?
The dilemma, just doing exercise presents the whole dilemma.
Yeah.
It's like you go, I have no idea what I'd do.
Yeah, and we'll talk about all like the barriers and all those things in a little bit as well. So let's hear a little bit about each story. So does someone want to go first and kind of share their story, the path that they took, some types of abuse that you saw happening? All of you guys will share, so it's just the brave one that wants to go first.
Let's do it.
Okay.
You guys read a card to everyone?
You don't know, just give a summary of kind of who your character was, kind of what abuse you saw happening.
Do you want to start?
Okay, you can carry on.
Doesn't matter. Denise is in a wheelchair. She is 45. She lives in the boonies with her 6 children. What else? There's not much out there, but it's beautiful. She likes horse riding. Something happened to her. She's been in a wheelchair for 5 years. She loves that her priest comes to visit her because it's an hour drive, so she values that a lot. Her husband is Jim. What else? Yeah, that's it. So then what happened first?
Well, it says like she used to go horse riding a lot, and then he asked her to marry him, and the problems began later. She ended up in the wheelchair because 5 years prior, she was in a car accident because her husband was driving fast and lost control. So that's how she ended up in the wheelchair to begin with.
It was the doctor's appointment, right? Was the first thing?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, so she had a doctor's appointment in town that got canceled. So she made her way back to the house and found Jim cheating on her with another woman. And when she confronted them, he physically assaulted both of them. And then the neighbors called the police. The police showed up. He played the victim and basically coerced the police into believing him and seeing her as mentally unsound.
And he had scratches on him.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd been beaten, but there weren't any bruises yet.
Right.
So you couldn't
So
see
you
them.
couldn't see any physical injury on her, so they believed him.
Oh, did you just say physical?
Yes.
Yeah, so he punched her.
Yeah, you put assault
Also
under.
pushed the other woman down.
It was physical assault.
Oh, physical assault, gotcha.
And then we decided to go to the priest instead of an advocate, because she's religious.
Mm-hmm.
And the priest said that she needed to be a better wife and pray about it, and
Stop
he
doing things to
basically
make the
blamed
husband.
her.
He's in charge.
So come some of those stigmas that gender stereotypes roles again. That kind of went into that. Probably I guess there's not emotional skills.
And so then it happened again. She went back to him, and then what did we do after that? Something about CPS.
Oh no, he was mad. Was that when he was mad from the game? He beat up
No,
his
that was
son.
later.
Beat up
Oh
his
yeah, he
son.
beat up. Then he beat up
Why?
his son because he was mad because he had a bad basketball game or something, or some sort of game.
Because something to do with stereotypes as it is, right? Because sports and you're not doing well at your sports, you're not being a man, so I'm gonna beat you.
Any,
So. Oh, sorry.
His son got kicked in the guts or something. And
They ended up in the
Has to go to the hospital.
but it took an hour for the ambulance to arrive, and last time she had to, it only took 10 minutes, so she was praying that it would come faster. But it didn't. But he was okay, I guess. Then who gave her the choice? From CPS or like
She went to a shelter, I think, that night after that. Was she in a shelter or was it at the hospital?
She didn't go home, she went to a
There's a lot.
shelter.
It sounds like a
Yeah,
lot of cycles kept happening.
Yeah,
and
choosing
then-
her friends or the shelter, and we.
I think we went to the shelter,
Shelter
not the
because she
friends.
has 6 kids.
And then the shelter told her to either call CPS
Yes.
or
Get a restraining
something else. We
order.
called CPS, and then CPS asked if she was fit to be a mom
Because
there's
she's in a
children with a wheelchair. And then she went back to her husband, and something happened. He got in a car accident. They died.
So the end was
They all died.
They both
Yeah.
passed away.
Because he
It was
was
very
mad
bad.
over something. He was
That
just
was
joking.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
she died.
They both
She died the
died.
same way she got in the wheelchair.
So
Yeah.
the 6 children now have no parents.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty intense one. It sounds like there was a
Yeah.
lot of paths that were happening lots of different things, and it sounds like ultimately almost
We rushed
each
him both
time.
a couple times, like, I don't know, they all suck.
Yeah. And it sounds like with each option that she went to, there was some, sounds like potential frustrations, which made her end up going back to her partner,
But
ultimately.
it was like the clergy didn't support her, the police didn't support her.
Kind of ran about ways.
CPS, they all blamed, oh, she went and saw a doctor who gave her anxiety
Exactly.
medications because it's all in her feeble little mind that she can't deal with all of this. So all the experts that she went to didn't listen to her story. They just assumed.
Yeah.
So she didn't get any support the whole way through.
Wow.
Was this in Australia? The Australian person got this.
We have lots of Catholics in Australia.
Okay, so were there any other types that I missed? Like, was there? I'm sure was there some verbal,
Yeah.
like what yelling?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your guys' story. Was there? How about I put like kind of in a small town?
Yeah.
Was there any financial that you saw, or any like other like cyber or social? No. Okay. Thank you guys for sharing. Who wants to share theirs next? So a little bit about the types that you saw happening.
We can go.
Okay,
Ours
great.
is long.
Okay, give us the semi-short version.
Okay, so we have Sandra, who is 21 years old, and she's from Mexico. Moved here just so that she could go to school to study biology. And her mom told her that she should be a housewife instead, and that if she gets too smart, no one's going to want to marry her. And she just didn't have the heart to tell her family that she's actually lesbian. So she got to college and got in a relationship with this woman named Rhonda. And Rhonda abused her, hit her first, right?
Yeah, called her a bunch of times, came banging on her house at like midnight. And
Yeah.
she finally let her in, and when she let her in, she beat her up pretty much.
Yeah. And then we could have called the police or have gone to see a
friends and
family
family.
friend. And we chose a family friend because just her being out of country is kind of like scary going to the police. So I felt like Sandra.
And it was the
probably-
first time, as far as we knew, you know, so it was like...
Yeah.
Did they already say that she wasn't illegal, or did she have proper documentation, or did it say?
It doesn't say. I'm assuming she's proper documentation since she's enrolled
She's
in
going to
college.
university, you know.
So.
Because I would definitely say that if that was the case, that's definitely a factor into why some people might stay,
Right.
if they don't have the.
And she definitely has like a communication, like there's a barrier, you know, like she doesn't she has definitely like some type of language barrier, so.
Yeah.
They bring that up a couple times.
Oh, do they?
Yeah. Yeah, so we went to go see a family friend. The friend said, I'm staying neutral, but you can stay the night here.
Pretty much, yeah.
So basically, she's kind of dismissed it.
Okay.
Just said Rhonda is, like has a, you know, she's an emotional person, but a good person, so she's not gonna take sides. You know?
Oh, so she was friends with Rhonda.
With friends.
Yeah, they went,
She's
she went to
friends
a
with
friend that
both.
was friends with both.
So kind of tied into that like social.
Because she couldn't go to her family, which we should have thought too. She could, you know, her family, her mom obviously doesn't. She's hiding it from her family.
Yeah.
So.
So it's kind of the social component of like coming out to her family, and then also that like of that like support system, like
Yeah.
And then she didn't have one.
taking
and then-
Right. So then we went to a support group next, I think. And then basically the support group shunned her for being lesbian.
Yeah.
They were very closed off to that, like, that lifestyle.
They said I thought women would treat each other nice,
Mm.
and
So there's a lot of stigmas around
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And then from there, I don't know,
she ended up talking to somebody's friend who had experience with same-sex domestic violence and referred her, right? I think she went and spoke
I
to
thought we
her.
went for a job though, and then she
Yeah.
stopped us.
yeah,
We went to go get a new job, and she found out.
Well, it was like, from that point it went to like, do you want to look for a job or a house was like the options for the help from that chick, which was kind of odd, you know, so we didn't really know what, and we looked for a job.
Then
and then-
Rhonda
No, did we look for a
slit
house?
her
Yeah, we
wrist, so
got-
we ended up in court because she blamed us for her injuries when they weren't.
Finding
Caused by
the
anybody
lawyer
but-
lesbian help was a wild card. And then
A wild
it was
card?
like,
Yeah, that's where we went wrong.
We're wrong on the wild card.
we were gonna move house, and then she
Oh, no,
found
that's
a
right,
new
yeah.
house.
And she did when she went to like the abuse center, she found a pamphlet on domestic violence and felt like she could probably get a restraining order. And then we decided to take the wild card and decided to go get the restraining order right there. And that's where we started really going downhill.
Yeah, well, we
And she
felt.
fell into a cycle at that point.
Okay.
Ended up getting back with Rhonda, and then Rhonda abused her again, actually cut her with an X-Acto knife, and then
Rhonda cut herself.
And then cut herself up, and then when the police got there, said that the other, the other girl, she was actually the one who was afraid, and the girl, went to court.
Yeah, but it seemed like every time we went to the police and to court, they were always bringing up terms that she didn't understand because of her bilingualness.
Yeah.
So it would.
And she would kind of panic and not know what to say.
So how did it end for Sandra?
After court, she called. We got like an
Yeah,
domestic violence
she went for
advocate
help
program.
again.
She went to like her own sexual orientation type of violence advocacy, and then went to school and had
She ended up getting a job in house. We went for new housing, and she got a house near the campus she was at and had a job on the campus, and then
she had a cat and it escaped.
Yeah, she got a cat.
A lesbian firefighter came and got it down, and they just tapped her after. That's what they told us.
No, that's what we wanted.
So then
You got one more card, that's what it would have been.
Well, yeah, they said, what do you think would happen? What did you want to happen? And what did you think would happen?
Gotcha.
That's what I planned for.
So that's what you're going for. So it sounds like a little nicer of an ending than the last story. Hope to have some positive stuff. But again, kind of a lot of turnaround with the different supposedly support systems, the resources that were in the community, some barriers that were there with the language that made her kind of be in that cycle that you talked about on going back with the partner. And then the abuse happened again, and then she'd go back to the partner. Right. Any abuse that we kind of looked over or missed?
Didn't the services not help her because she was a lesbian?
So
No,
the
I think
first
it was a
service that we
support group
went to.
that kind of shunned her.
Yeah, the first services that we went to basically they weren't open about it, because every time she was like, she keeps hitting me, she does this, she does that, everyone kind of stood up and was like, oh, I think
Yeah, but the
you
support
brought it
group,
upon
though.
yourself because that's a
I
sin,
think both times she went for
basically.
services, it was housing or job option.
Okay.
It was like both times it was like the same option. We went to like domestic help twice, and one time we took a job, one time we took the house.
Yeah, well, and then housing, the advocacy housing kicked her out of housing because she let Rhonda stay the night.
But it kept going back to, should you look for a job or should you get help? And so that seemed financial to me, because it's always like, putting that ahead of other things.
Was that happening by the partner or by the services?
What?
Well, once she
The
didn't get
pressure.
that protective order, and she had probation or something that she had to pay for at that point.
Well, they never even mentioned if she had a job the whole time.
Well, it sounds like
Greg.
Greta's saying is that it was a barrier for her to seek help. So she had to
Because
pick
she
either one.
needed-
Do you have to pick a job?
Yeah.
Go find a job, or do you have to find help?
And we kept referencing, like, isn't she in school? Why is there always this job pressure? But maybe that's kind of.
And it kind of talks, it sheds light on the reality of real life and where some, we're fortunate enough that Child Safe Lines provides all of our services free of charge, but there might be places that aren't doing that. So if they want that support, they need to have that money, which could be a potential barrier.
Do they need to have the job to get the support? Like there's stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, that might have been a factor at the agency that she had or something like that. So that, I could see that definitely being a barrier as to why maybe she went back to a partner instead of trying to make it on her own, because maybe she couldn't get that financial support. Because when you're in crisis, sometimes all those things can be hard, right? Doing our daily tasks when you're in crisis and you're in trauma. Doing things like trying to find a job or even going to the job that you already have can seem a lot harder and challenging than when we're not in crisis. So yeah, definitely a barrier. Thank you guys for sharing.
Real estate, and she met her husband John at church, and then after that, the problems began. One day she got home and her 3-year-old daughter was crying upstairs, and he was watching TV. And she yelled at him, asking why she was crying, and he didn't say anything. And then she went up to the room and she had wet her bed, the little girl. So then she got in a fight with him, and that's when he slapped her across the face and said that he was leaving her and that he never wanted to have a daughter in the first place. And then after that,
Did we go to court or?
And then he, so he left. But then he didn't he want custody
yeah, and then
of the daughter?
so I think we went to court. It was either go to court or go to the doctor, but we went to court. And the judge ruled against her because John told him that she was an alcoholic and that, what else, that she was never home or something.
She was a
lot.
workaholic too.
Yeah.
That she was always working, and that was what she cared about more than
the daughter.
her family. Yeah.
And so the judge ruled against her, and then we went, then she tried to talk to her sister, and her sister pretty much was against her too. She said that she was lucky to have John, the husband, that that the sister kind of wished she had him, so she was really lucky to have him. So then we went to court again.
I thought she ended up going back, and then.
Oh yeah, she went back with him. Yeah. And then that's when she noticed that her daughter, one time she was like giving her a bath, and the little girl said that her dad touched her down there.
Okay.
So then she left again and tried to get help at a shelter, but the shelter was full, so she couldn't stay there. And then
She went to another shelter.
Yeah, and then
and she got in there, and they were helpful. And there was a support system, but then she ended up going out to California.
Oh yeah, the shelter that had space for her was in California, so she moved out there. And then one day, a police officer came to the shelter to get her, and he had a warrant out for her arrest because she kidnapped the daughter and took her out of the state. And then she had to go to court again.
So that would almost be like
custody.
what we call legal abuse.
We put it under this one.
Yeah, so that's another thing that would go under, like, using the family court system against somebody. Because, it's actually it's interesting that that's brought up, because where we are positioned, Kings Beach, Incline Village, in between there, Crystal Bay, is where there's a state line. And to us, it's just, you're crossing the state line, it's just a pretty drive over to Incline or a pretty drive over to Kings Beach. But when it comes down to the legal system and custody orders and things like that, if you bring your child across state lines and you move, possibly because you can't find housing in Incline, so you move to Kings Beach, that's a huge, huge issue in the family court's eyes, because those are two different states with two different jurisdictions.
Even though they're like 4 miles apart.
And two different laws. Yeah. Even though they're 4 miles apart. So it's very interesting where we live right now, is that we live between, basically Tahoe, North Lake Tahoe is between two states. And so that's very common that happens with victims that come for our services, is they want to leave Incline, but they don't want to go to Reno. They want to stay up in North Lake, but there's very, very limited options of what they can do. So it's good to think about.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, thanks for thinking of the legal ones.
I used to be the legal advocate, so I know.
But yeah, definitely another type that's a huge factor into it.
There was a positive while she was in the shelter. She connected with a support group, and she was able to find, just like real nurturing support there, but also women that had even much more horrible stories than she did, but a real sharing of compassion and support. But then they came and arrested her.
So is that how it ended? Was she arrested?
And then she comes from like a wealthy family, so her mom was able to help her with the court and getting a lawyer and everything.
But she had to go back to Washington?
Yeah, she had to go back, and then she was able to get out on bond. And then she went to another advocate. Did she go to family advocate group? Yeah. And then that's where her story ends. she tells them that she wants to become a lawyer so she can help mothers and children to fight to be safe. And that's where her story ends.
Where was her kid in all of this though, in between flinging around?
With her mom.
She they put her with her family.
Yeah.
But then they did, like, he tried again in court, right? For custody, but they wouldn't grant him custody, and he had to have supervised visits. And then he did visit a few times, and then he quit.
Stopped visiting.
He quit visiting altogether. And that's whenever she kind of created her own path and said, I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to represent women.
Oh, because she said that since she was like, came from a wealthier background, she was lucky because she had that support and that money, but there's other women out there who don't have like that support and don't have the money.
Yeah, so trying to like recognize her privilege and use it for good.
For good, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for sharing. Abuse happened in your story. You saw 4 different types. 5 different types?
I have 6.
6? Yeah, so 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the 8. We're getting into 9 and 10 over here. But kind of going back to that, the metaphor that I talked about earlier, the more sort of spokes that someone has over another person, that more power and control that they'll have over that person, and harder it is to leave, right? And so in most of your stories, you guys probably saw that it was just one at first, and it might have not seemed as intense, but then as the cycle continued and it got more, the abuse started getting more intense, more different types started happening throughout the story, and all to maintain and establish that power and control, right? And so we're going to move on to the cycle of violence, which a lot of you guys talked about. You saw some cycle happening in your story, so we'll just, break?
Break?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I
I just wanted to give them a break. Like 5-10 minutes, and then we'll talk about the cycle of abuse.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the cycle of violence. Like a lot of you guys mentioned in your stories, you saw some sort of cycle. So we're going to dive a little deeper into that. And although it's called the cycle of violence, the first 2 phases are actually part of a healthy relationship. It's just when you get into that last section where that abuse starts happening. So if you guys might not have this in a handout, so if you have space on your note things and want to write it down, I think it's a great thing to write down. You might already have it. It looks like someone actually might have it over there.
Oh yeah, no, that's a different.
But anyways, the different cycle. Either way, if you want to write it down because you're a visual learner and need to have it written down.
Page 14, whoever doesn't have it up.
Cool. So thinking of, we're going to start with number 1 in cycle violence. So thinking of a healthy relationship, you've just met someone, things are cool, things are exciting, you're connecting. What do you think that first phase would be? And again, thinking of like healthy relationships, you just met someone, sparks are flying, you're having that connection.
Honeymoon phase.
Honeymoon phase, absolutely.
Even though it says it on your paper.
You already knew that anyways. So this is a honeymoon phase. You're meeting someone, you're connecting, you have that connection, you have that chemistry, you're getting those butterflies in your stomach, you're walking on a cloud of rainbows and butterflies and all those exciting things because that connection is strong and it's real and it's super exciting. So we call that the honeymoon phase. And then in any relationship, whether it's friends, family members, intimate partners, anyone who you spend some time with, what is bound to happen? Tension. So we call this tension building. And is tension bad?
No, not necessarily. I think it's a natural part of most relationships.
Absolutely, yeah. So we talk about this in our high school presentations. Tension is not bad. It's how you handle it that has the potential to make it bad, right? So tension, in my opinion, is a great opportunity to grow your relationship, to strengthen your relationship, but it's how you handle it, right? So in any relationship, you're bound to have tension, right? If everyone on this planet dressed the same, act the same, had the same opinions, had the same experiences, we probably wouldn't, it'd probably be a pretty boring society, right? So we have differences. We come from different backgrounds, we come from different worlds, we have different life experiences, and with that is gonna form different opinions and a chance for tension. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It's how we handle that can make it healthy and get you back into that honeymoon phase, or that can make it getting into that abuse cycle. And so when you have tension in a relationship, what are things that you can do as an individual to help kind of get you and your partner out of that tension?
Communicate.
Absolutely. So those are things that like you can both do, right? So talk about it. Huge one. I'll put two explanation points. So talking about it, right? Having that vulnerable conversation, having that intense conversation because you know it needs to happen so you can get out of that tension, right? In a healthy way. So definitely talking about it. What are things, who's ever had a bad day before? Everyone should probably be raising their hand, right? We've all been stressed out and had a bad day at some point in our life. And again, that's okay, that's normal, that's part of our fluctuation of life, right? But it's how we handle that tension that can make our life better, right? So have you ever had a bad day and it's affected your other relationships in your life? Absolutely, right? Because we have stress, we have tension, and sometimes that can tumble onto our other relationships, right? So when we ourselves are having tension, it can also cause tension in a relationship. And so how can we as individuals take care of ourselves to get us out of that tension? What are those self-care things that you like to do?
Exercise.
Exercise, definitely. Read. Oops.
Meditation.
Breathe, right?
Journal. Meditation.
Loud music.
Read. Music.
Dance.
Dance.
Yoga.
Sorry, what did I say?
Yoga.
Yoga, yeah.
Swear.
I'll do it like Vic session.
We can swear.
Yeah, so taking care of ourselves, right? In order to take care of our relationships, we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves too. And then when it's appropriate, when it feels right, making sure as a couple, as a partner, you talk about it, right? That's extremely important to get yourself out of that tension. And so you've taken care of yourself. Hopefully your partner is doing the same thing, taking care of yourself. You guys are taking care of themselves. You come together, you talk about it, and then it gets you back into that honeymoon phase. So this is a healthy relationship.
Question on that. So if you're having that sucky, rotten day and you're feeling like junk, you come home to your partner and then they just lay blame on you because they haven't got the empathy or didn't understand what it was, and then they start doing what we've seen here, well, you're this, you're that, then that's going to increase the tension building no matter how much self-care, because when you have a relationship, you expect to be supported. So that other partner needs to back off and go, wait a minute, what's been going on in your world that I don't know? Maybe I can support you, and shifting that.
So isn't there another aspect where like if the talking doesn't solve it, it's breaking up?
Well, yeah, so we're gonna talk about that in a second. Yeah, absolutely, that's another. So what I wanted to do is talk about the healthy component right now. So in the ideal relationship world, you are in the honeymoon phase, you have tension, both your partners work on it in a healthy way, you talk about it, and then you get back into the honeymoon phase, and this is like the healthy relationship cycle, right? You're bound to have tension. Both of you guys are coming to the party with knowing that you're taking care of yourself, you're having that support system, you're talking about it, and you get back into the honeymoon phase. So that's that healthy relationship cycle. But sometimes we're all not perfect, sometimes we don't live in that ideal vision, and sometimes that tension can stay. Either one of the partners isn't taking care of themselves, isn't recognizing that the other person needs that support or needs that time to take care of themselves, whatever it might be. For whatever reason, you're not getting back into that honeymoon phase. It might not be getting worse, but it's sort of staying in that tension. And we all know when we're having a bad, stressful day, that's really hard for us, right? It's really hard for our mental state. And that's just one day. So imagine a week like that, a month like that, multiple months like that, where we're just staying in that tension. It might not be getting worse, but it's not getting better. So what is another option that you can do at that point?
Quit it.
Yeah.
Wake up. So That's definitely an option that sometimes we overlook, right? Because we spent time in that honeymoon phase, and that honeymoon phase was real, and it was exciting, and we wanted to just get back to that, and we believe that it will get back to that, and so sometimes we forget that that's an option, but recognizing that if we're not getting back to that, and we're staying in this tension, that it's not healthy for really any partners, or any people in that relationship, and looking at that option of breaking up. So that's sort of where that component has that breakup option. And then statistically, what you guys have seen in your stories, you're not getting back to that honeymoon phase, you're kind of, that tension is building. What is bound to happen? Abuse. So the cycle, the 3 is abuse happens, and that is all the stuff that you guys saw in your stories, all those different types. But this is a cycle, so how do you think it gets from 3 to 1? We call this arrow something.
Forgiveness. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we call it the I'm sorry arrow. And we put it in quotations because the I'm sorry could look a lot of different ways, right? It could look like giving someone a gift, taking them out to dinner, saying, I'll never do this again. I don't know what was going on with me. I saw red. This is not who I am. This is the person who I am. Please forgive me. And they, they want to get back to that. They truly believe that is the person, right? They spent time in that honeymoon phase. The honeymoon phase was real, and they just want to get back to it. The I'm sorry arrow can also look like blame. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have had to do this. This is who I am, so don't do all those things, and then I'll be this person all the time. So the I'm sorry arrow can look a lot of different ways. Do you have a question?
I kind of disagree on this honeymoon phase because in 2 months I'll be married 21 years. So I've been through a lot of phases, and we went through a struggle. That honeymoon, how you described it, is not, you can never get back to that. It's just like as you evolve in a relationship, it's different. It's never that. So it's like hearing you speak is like we're chasing that giddy first time
It
thing.
does never get better though?
That'll never, it's different. It's not the same.
I experienced this for 13 years, so I know, and we chased the honeymoon phase forever, and we did get back there, and especially sometimes after really crazy fights and like crazy abuse, like, and then to get back together, it can kind of be like, oh, like this huge relief, and actually feels exciting, like, you know what I mean? It is
back
like freshness again, you know what I mean? And then it just slowly goes back, and it's a real thing for sure.
Yeah, and that honeymoon phase can look different in every cycle that you're going through, right?
It seems like an unattainable thing. The longer you've been with someone, it's never that. It's different. So
it's different.
Like,
and
it gives you different things.
Whatever that connectiveness looks like, that's your honeymoon phase with your partner. And this is also coming from a sociological perspective. So studying groups. Obviously, every relationship is different and has its own phases and own cycles, and so this is coming from a sociological perspective. But
you could even call it the harmonious state.
Right. Well, they're not saying that you're gonna get back to the honeymoon. I mean,
that's fun, man. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, but so what they're saying is that it's a cycle, right? So it might not be a honeymoon because sometimes relationships don't start off as a honeymoon. They just start off as a friendship that turns as a relationship. It looks different for everyone, but it's getting back to that good time, right? Where you're living your lives and there's no tension and you're happy. And so that honeymoon phase is kind of drastic term to kind of embody what the good times are. Yeah. And it's a public health model that is their terminology, but it really, the point is the happy moments.
Yeah, and whatever those happy moments look like, I would assume that no relationship would start off with physically slapping someone, right? No matter what that connection looks like, we have a connection with someone. We're making that chemistry, things feel good, or else we wouldn't be getting in a relationship, whether that be a friend or intimate partner, so whatever that happy honeymoon phase looks like to you, it's like it's
and it's also a cycle, and it's not even necessarily always getting back to it, it's that you're always chasing it. Even if you get back to some semblance of it, you're still always seeking what you remembered in the beginning. You're in love with that, memory, you know what I mean, and like what you had. So.
Totally, and especially, this is called the cycle of violence, and I would say if you're in the cycle with the 3, not just the 1 and 2, that is a chase, right?
Yeah,
and so if you're not experiencing that abuse component, that honeymoon phase might not be as big of a chase as it is when you are experiencing all 3 of the cycles. Again, bigger sociological perspective. It's actually funny that you say that because I've done this presentation with my boyfriend before, and let me practice these presentations with you. And he has a hard time seeing this too because he has a very psychological mind, so individuals, and I studied sociology, and so mine's like the group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not.
And so it's just he sees a psychological mind individual, and I see sociological group studies more, but it's all how we look at it and how we interpret things, and
it's simplifying a really complex relationship
into like 3 little categories.
Into a way that's easy to understand how someone could get into this situation. So it's not saying that this is how relationships are. You see cycles throughout intimate partner violence relationships where they are going from these phases, but that doesn't mean that they might jump off the cycle and get back on the cycle, and there is different components of relationships, and this is just a way to understand the person that's experiencing it.
So some crazy statistics to kind of final off this cycle of violence. If someone is in this cycle, so typically or statistically, this could take potentially a year to complete or even 5 years to complete, but once it's completed once, so the statistic is that it'll take faster, each cycle will go faster and faster. So the first time it might have been 5 years, and then the next time, once it's been completed, it'll take a year, and then 3 months, and then 6 months, to where it potentially could be happening every day, to where even the honeymoon phase is no longer a part of it, and you're just kind of going back and forth between tension and abuse. And has anyone heard the terminology, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you. So that, falls into that, where they're just feeling like that honeymoon phase isn't there anymore, and they're just kind of going back and forth between tension and abuse. And in some cases, someone could even have tension going on and know that there's this event or gathering going on, and they don't want the abuse to happen at that event. So they might even trigger the abuse to happen, so at that event or activity, that abuse doesn't go off there. So they can even potentially trigger that abuse to happen in that cycle. Another crazy statistic, if someone chooses to leave this cycle and want to get on their feet, they're 7 times more likely to have either serious injury or death happen. And why do you think that is?
Their partner.
Yeah, if they want to leave this cycle, leave this abusive relationship, they're 7 times more likely to have serious death or serious injury or death. And why do you think that is?
Didn't want to give up the power.
Yeah. Exactly, right? That's really strong and that's really powerful. And so if they're leaving that, what is that perpetrator or abuser losing? Power and control, right?
Yeah, people still leave, right? So
yes, but that's why we have things like safe houses now, and agencies have started picking up on that and recognizing that, and so that's why we have things like safe houses and transitional housing and stuff. So when people come and they are fearful of their life, we have options and resources that we can provide.
Because if it's that bad, I'm sorry, it's not good enough, right? If someone's really physically harming someone.
Well, and that's why
that's what happens is on the cycle
and that's a big barrier to why people might not leave, and that's what we're going to talk about next is why people might not leave, and that fear is a huge barrier to why someone might not leave.
I want to touch on something too that you mentioned earlier. It is repeatedly. So if this cycle happens once, and maybe there was a verbal abuse, there was a name calling, and then there was an apology and that was it, and everything was fine. That's not intimate partner violence. It does need to happen repeatedly for it to be intimate partner violence. So just because there's an argument and someone got heated, doesn't mean that you're in an intimate partner violence relationship. It's that repeated abuse that normally escalates over time.
Then you're saying there's some things that aren't that, like if you beat your wife to a pulp.
Right.
Sure,
Well,
there's
yeah.
like
there's
violent
like,
acts
Violent,
that
right.
are like
That's
singular
still
that are
violence and
still
assault,
considered
and
violence, but
That doesn't need to repeat through the cycle to be.
No. Well, that would be assault. I mean, you would
Okay.
be arrested for assault for the most. I mean, that'd be the
I
biggest
mean,
thing.
that's still not intimate partner violence because it lacks the repeated cycle.
Right.
That at that point is just an assault.
So
and there's actually specific domestic violence laws outside of just like a physical assault against a partner that you're living with, because our justice system has realized that there are certain aspects of intimate partner violence that contribute to the violence, and so there's different laws when it comes to domestic violence and different sentencing guidelines too for that, because of the repetitiveness, the violence that happens in between it. So.
And I would say a lot of times, some people might not even recognize the types of abuse that are happening to them prior to maybe physical, you know? Like I would say a lot of the times, you know, there's a lot of mental and emotional going on. There's some belittling and verbal and blame going on. And then maybe, you know, then eventually that physical component goes into factor and they seek help, and they might just think the only abuse I've ever had is, you know, he or she has slapped me. And then they start talking more about the domestic violence education, and you know, we go through these wheels, and they start recognizing like, oh wow, like he's also been blaming me for years, or she also has been I mean, yeah, I do both obviously, but it's like they have been belittling you, or you know, so like they start picking up on other components that they might not have categorized as abuse before they maybe went and got help and got that support. To where then they have recognized that it is repeated. They might have thought it was just a one-time act, but now that they are getting more talking about it, recognizing that it has been repeated in different components of it, you know, throughout the cycle. A very common thought process that happens in multiple people's minds, and potentially when you guys were reading the story, is why don't they just leave? Why don't they just leave? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So what are some barriers to why someone might not leave in an unhealthy or abusive relationship? Absolutely.
Children.
Kids,
Money, kids.
Housing.
Lack of support.
Housing. Lack of support.
Religion, that's good, yeah.
Definitely.
You say language?
Yeah, language.
Language
If you're
barrier.
an immigrant, you don't speak English.
Even emotional dependency.
Yeah, codependency is a huge one, right? I feel like sometimes we even get that with like our friends, and
Yeah.
I spelled that wrong. See, when I don't know how to spell, I just kind of scribble, so that's codependency right there. So language barriers also, if you don't have the proper documentation, then the fear of getting deported could also be a barrier to why someone might not leave. Any others that you guys said that I might have missed when I was trying to write them all
No, I
down?
think if they broke your self-esteem down enough that you're nothing, then no one else is gonna
Self-worth.
want you, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, how many times have we kind of had that negative self-talk on ourselves, like I'm not gonna pass this math test or whatever it is. If someone is repeatedly telling us like, I'm the only one that will ever love you, you won't find love like mine, if you leave, you're not gonna have any friends, you're not gonna have a support system, you'll never find love again, you're worthless, whatever those belittling talks are, you might start believing that, and that you won't find other love, and this is the only option that I have. And so that is a huge barrier why someone might not leave.
Isolation.
Yeah. Kind of ties in with that lack of support or resources, right? Like not knowing what's out there. Maybe you've been isolated, moved to a new place to where you don't know the resources in your community anymore. What about like judgment? Do you think that could be one?
Absolutely.
Maybe
Your friends could be telling you it's no big deal. They're fantastic.
yeah.
This person is great.
Student
You're so
times.
lucky.
Don't believe me.
Yeah, I don't believe you. That the perpetrator could also look like, in the eyes of the community, a perfect person, right? to where if you said something that they'd be like, what? No, this person would never do that. What are you talking about? So sort of that judgment that might be placed on that as well.
I'd say even hopelessness.
Yeah.
And also, some people have been brought up seeing an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And that's their normal.
Conditioning.
Cycle. Yeah. If you were brought up in an abusive household, that might be what you think is a normal relationship or a healthy relationship, and so you might not know anything else. And so yeah, that can be a huge factor. So I mean, we just spent like probably a minute brainstorming, and we have a huge list. And so I always like to bring this up because I think it's really easy for us when we're not in a relationship to say like, well, why don't you just leave them? Like, why don't you just break up with them? Like, it's that easy, just break up with them. But when you dive a little deeper into the story, you recognize that there are a lot of barriers, and that we, shouldn't be quick to judge and say, why don't you just leave? Instead, saying things like, how can I help you? How can I support you? It sounds like you're going through a really hard time right now. How can I help you through this? So that's why we always like to talk about barriers, because within a minute we came up with like over 10, so if we spend another minute, I'm sure we could come up with even more. And so the last thing that I wanted to talk about is warning signs. So like we kind of mentioned, most relationships don't start off with, breaking your bones, punching you, slapping you, belittling you. Most of the time that's not going to be your first date experience, so you probably want to go on a second date. So there are typically, during that honeymoon phase, we might overlook things because we're happy and excited and we're connecting. So what are some of those potential warning signs that we can be aware of?
Destructive behavior.
Yeah.
Think about your stories too. Like, do we ever like, oh wow, that's not good.
Red light, yeah.
And I go along with like destructive behavior, maybe like a subcategory, another category, but like impulse behavior or like
I'm saying like not taking care of your things, like you have nice wood floors and you just like jam your tools down, like not taking care of leave things looking nice.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And like I would say potentially a subcategory that is like that sort of aggressive,
yelling,
maybe slamming onto that hardwood floor, kind of that like
thinking carelessness.
Carelessness, yeah, totally. And then kind of like extreme or explosive temper.
Yeah, irritable.
Even if it's not directed at you, like if someone accidentally pushed them in the hallway and if their temper just explodes, or like, something over something really silly, even if it's not directed to you, that warning sign that they have that explosive temper. Rage, yeah.
Wait, are we talking about warning signs that they are an abuser or that you're being abused?
The potential's there.
Yeah, the potential's there. So warning signs that, deserves a conversation, right? Deserves to be talked about.
Extreme jealousy, like abnormal jealousy.
Yeah.
Possessiveness, yeah.
Is jealousy a bad thing?
Not at all. It's healthy in some way. I mean, it's normal.
Exactly. It's like that tension feeling. It's how you talk about it that can make it healthy or unhealthy. Jealousy is just like a feeling like any other feeling, sad, frustrated, angry. But there's a lot of stigmas placed on jealousy, and sometimes we don't know how to handle jealousy. But if you can handle it in a healthy way and talk about it, that gets you back into that happy phase where that abuse isn't happening. But yeah, that explosive jealousy or not knowing how to handle that jealousy is definitely a warning sign.
I say persistent.
Or persistent.
Jealousy, where the person's always like, well, where were you?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how come you looked at that guy or whatever?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
So,
that's a persistent type of thing.
And not knowing how to handle it, and that's why they're being persistent on it, right? Like constantly being like, where are you? What are you doing? Instead of trying to have that conversation on like, hey, I'm feeling jealous right now. I don't know how to handle this emotion. How can we work on this together? Sort of that persistent and not knowing how to handle it. Absolutely. Any other warning signs?
Lack of empathy.
Yeah.
How about wanting to isolate you?
That was what I was thinking.
Yeah, that would be more of
friends,
abuse than it would be a warning sign, because it is one of the types of abuse. So if you're sensing isolation, that you've passed the point where you've seen.
It could, but what about just in the beginning of the relationship? It was like, you know, you want to go somewhere with your friends, and then they're kind of like, well, it might be better if we just go hang out, like just continually try to just lead you away from your.
Yeah.
Well, and they do it where it's like, well, just
Slowly
spend time
isolate
with me.
you,
What
you
about
know?
me? You
I
feel
love
like,
you so
oh, I'm
much.
being isolated.
Yeah.
That's where I'm hanging out
Right.
all
Yeah,
the time.
totally. I love you
Right.
so much. Like, why don't you just spend time with me? Why don't you go to the movies with me instead
Yeah,
of
so
your friends?
guilt tripping kind of could be just making
Oh,
someone feel
yeah.
guilty for their behavior
Yeah,
is a red flag for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
the guilt trip.
don't you love me?
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
like the big one.
Yeah. Don't you love me? Don't you want to go to the movies with me instead of your friends?
If you
Yeah,
love
so that
yeah,
guilt
that
trip
one.
and blame, even though blame is like a component, it could also be a warning sign too. That the guilt trip.
Not honoring your no, you know, as you get
Yeah.
intimate, when you say I'm not comfortable, whatever level, wherever you are,
Yeah,
and then just push
your boundaries,
We'll
right?
go
Not
through that
respecting
in-
your boundaries.
Yeah, we'll go through that in sexual assault, but that, I mean, if they're not honoring your no, that's sexual assault. That's not a warning sign.
Right.
You're there.
But maybe you could go more into the pressures.
making out, and
Right?
you're like that's enough. And like,
Well, it could be even just like, you know, don't eat my food or don't,
Yeah,
you know,
like that,
don't
like low.
sit in my spot.
Yeah, you know, that pressure or coercion. Like this is what you do at 6 months. This is how you show your love. That those pressures and coercions can be a big warning
and
sign.
stereotypes too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You're a woman, you're a this, you're a man, you're a this.
Yeah.
And that could be potentially under both warning sign and barriers as to why they might not leave those stereotypes and genders, which fall into that pressure category that men have to be a certain way and women have to be this certain way, like dominant and submissive, and be a barrier to why someone might not leave, and a warning sign.
So like just someone's vernacular and how they speak about
name
men or
calling.
women could be a warning sign, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
The
Yeah, that sort
terminology
of,
they use.
Nag me all the time.
have that conversation. So when I don't want you to just scare you and be like, oh my God, I've seen this happen in one of my relationships before. Oh my gosh. Because that's not what we're saying. If we're just going to say that, like.
Everybody's already taking it.
Just saying that, it deserves a
Probably
conversation.
done all of those in my marriage.
Yeah, we've all had bad days before. We've all done things that we might not have wanted to do. And again, it comes down to communication and talking about it and learning your partner's boundaries, knowing, what that respect looks like for them, what that boundaries look like for them, and taking the time to nurture that.
Would you also say like the kind of, so from the movie we watched last week, would be like the video games, the violent video games, if that's the only thing that you watch, like.
Right.
Yeah,
I
could be a
think
warning
that-
sign for sure.
I
For
think
me,
that's a
watching it, seeing that
societal.
much violence was like, woo, do people immerse themselves? Then it
It's
becomes
almost
okay.
a norm now. though.
Yeah, that's a societal norm that I don't
It
think
is.
we can use as an expectation for violence because it is just so accepted and taught from such an early age. It's, we're starting to put people in boxes when we're saying if you only watch violent movies and TV shows and play violent video games, you're a violent person, right? So we don't want to put them in a box as well when we're
But we're not
thinking
saying
about
that with these
things.
warning signs. So yes, that could be a warning sign. Again, it's just something to talk about, right? We're not putting these people in a box with these warning signs saying they're abusive people. We're just saying these could potentially be red flags to have a conversation about. So if you feel like someone who's only watching violent video games or playing video games is a warning sign, a red flag to you, then talk about it. So.
I think a warning sign, excuse me, is if you can't talk about it.
Absolutely. Totally. If you
That's
can't
a-
communicate.
Yeah.
Put that on there.
Or doesn't want to, like, oh, wait, this is an issue.
This is how we do it. This
Right.
is how I do it. Yeah.
I sort of.
That's a good summary wrap up of warning signs if you
What about
don't
animal
want
abuse?
to.
That would be just
that would
abuse.
be getting into more of like the abuse. for
Right,
sure.
that's actual
Yeah,
abuse, so.
yeah.
Well, but that's something to note on. People train and treat animals differently. So
Right.
if they're more aggressive with animals with punishment, maybe that's something
It's
that.
a red flag for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're not quite at the abuse, but it's like, ooh, wow, that dog just barked, and then you hit him. Yeah, something like that. Where, yeah.
Till they shut up.
In next class, we'll talk about the link between animal
I was gonna
abuse
say,
Oh, yeah.
and TV.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll
I
have
said something
Washington
like that
County
happened
Services
already.
coming in and talking about that.
So, does anyone want me to leave this up for a second to take more notes? Because we're gonna erase it because we have a PowerPoint.
I
Good?
have a question really
Yeah.
quick. For the like healthy relationship or like the point where they're in the tension building and can't get out and it doesn't lead to abuse, do you ever talk about, like you can't talk about it, like getting help, like counseling, that aspect? For some
Totally.
people, it's not easy to just go to that breakup phase. You have
Totally.
kids or-
Yeah. So, if that's brought up, that's definitely an option, right? So, talking about it on your own, talking about it with professional help, can definitely be an option as well. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so we are gonna move on to this PowerPoint. Feel free to take notes.
Yeah. Have all the handouts.
I have a little clicker that you guys can use.
Perfect. So feel free to take notes as we go. You don't have to. There's a lot of information on the PowerPoint. That's why we printed it out for you guys so you have it. Some of them we don't need to read all of the statistics and things, but maybe we'll go over them really quick. So let's see. Well, Andrea is putting that up. What is stalking? Bless you. Anyone want?
When someone is secretly following someone else to see where they're going, what they're doing, who they're with.
Does it have to be secret?
No. But I think it's
Usually
It starts that way.
yeah, and I think stereotypically as well, it's that secret man in a hat that's got a long trench coat that's like hiding behind walls and stuff, which in reality it's not. But it can definitely look like that, and we'll talk about that. What else? What else comes to mind when we talk about stalking?
Cyber stalking.
Yeah, definitely.
That's easy now.
Yeah, and it has a lot of repercussions. I was actually, when I was home for the weekend, I had a friend whose professor, who she's writing her dissertation with, was just arrested for cyber stalking and is going to prison for 40 years.
40 years?
Yeah, it was kind of complicated. It involved the fire department and obstructing of justice. But the point is she used Twitter and Facebook and somehow was able to control the entire fire department so they couldn't do their job.
Wow, that's
It was really, it's a professor at Northern Arizona University, if you want to look it up. It was really fascinating. So that is definitely prevalent right now. Let's see, well, let's go ahead and move into this. So can someone read me the statutes? Just read the Nevada side.
Sure. Purposeful course of conduct causes a reasonable person to feel fear and actually causes fear. General intent.
Good. And someone can read the California side.
She's gonna be.
Harassment or following credible threat causes reasonable fear and specific intent.
Good. What stands out?
The difference between general and specific.
I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah.
General intent.
What does that mean?
It's very vague.
Right? Yeah, it's not saying like it's super vague.
Like
You don't know.
Maybe intended to do it.
Right. Exactly.
California says causes reasonable fear. Well, who decides what's reasonable?
Right. And
Actually causes fear. Like how you prove or disprove that.
So
Right.
what's interesting about that is that stalking is one of the most hardest cases to prove because you have to prove intent, you have to prove causes reasonable fear, and that means reasonable fear means different to everybody.
Everybody's
And so it's just up to the DA, the district attorney, to try to get enough evidence and things like that where if you presented that to a jury and things like that, they would all agree that would create reasonable fear. This is not working. Sorry, guys.
And I would argue if you feel fear, it's reasonable.
It's fear.
Right. Yeah. It is. Right. There's a reason you're feeling fear. Even if at the moment it might not actually be what you think it is, you felt fear for a reason. And
It's like people hack stuff here, And
Oh, yeah.
Some people aren't afraid, and others are like, no way, man. There's different levels of fear, you know.
Right, but if you feel afraid, you're afraid for a reason. And I always go back to that gut feeling, right? We're taught, I think, over time to ignore that. And by saying reasonable fear, we're saying, no, your gut's wrong. This is something you shouldn't be feeling.
But then it's
Which is
not
not true.
impartial judgment either, because all of us will have a different version of what you think, what is fear, and
Right.
you can't be impartial.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing on these laws is that you can't be impartial on all of these. I mean, actually causes fear, general intent. I can decide what general intent is, and it can be completely different than what you decide. So, same with specific intent, really.
I was just wanting to find out more about you, because I think you're fantastic. And you're like, yeah, but you creeped me out.
Right.
No, because you're great.
Right, exactly. Right, and the person that might be doing it with not bad intentions, but it could be leaving someone uncomfortable and fearful.
Especially when we don't know the history.
Right, or who they are. Yeah. Good.
That's lame.
Yeah. So jurisdiction. Andrew talked earlier, because we are Nevada and California, things look different, right? Because we have 2 states, and we also have 3 counties, right? We have Placer, Nevada, and Washoe. So different laws, different processes for each area. But for jurisdiction, if it's happening in Nevada, you can file in Nevada, you can file in California. Wherever you feel like you need protection, you can file and say, this is happening, I need help. Any questions about that?
When you say file, you mean file with the court system?
The court system or police or kind of however you want to do that.
Nevada state or county?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if something's in Nevada, you can file in Nevada County?
So if it was in Nevada, it'd be Washoe County.
Yeah, so if it was in Nevada, so sorry, that's confusing. Nevada
Yeah.
County is in California.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
but Nevada state
Is just up
is,
the road.
yeah, is Nevada, yeah.
And Incline is in Washoe County.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Truckee's Nevada.
if you're feeling like the stalking in incline
Mm.
and you have like a restraining order, does that carry over to California when you cross the state line, which is 3
You'd have to
minutes
file
out?
2 different ones.
You have
Right,
to
you have to
have
file
2
one
ones,
for
yeah.
California also, right?
Right, but if you're not filing a restraining order and you're notifying police, you can call any court system and let them know.
Right.
But for a restraining order, yes, you need it in each state.
It's really interesting too, because especially up here, wherever the crime happens is where you need to make the report, and that's where the court that it goes through. But if you work in Placer County, which is Kings Beach, and you live in Incline Village, you have to have 2 separate restraining orders normally to cover you, because California jurisdictions can't respond on a Nevada court order, which is so bizarre. And you would think they would totally work together. And our law enforcement agencies up here try to work the best together as they possibly can. But it really kind of goes down to funding when you think about it. They only have funding to respond to California calls in their county. And I don't know if anybody's ever called 911 on a highway on 89. I did it one time because of a road rage thing. They transferred me between 3 different counties. It was between California Highway Patrol, between Nevada County, and between Placer County, because the line crosses right there off of 89 when you're coming from Squaw to Truckee. And it was so frustrating, but that's how they work, It just depends on where you're at on that road is who you get.
Yeah. So the intricate legal processes would be an Andrea question.
Pick my brain.
Yeah. Good. So there's different types of stalking. We talked about the lurker in the bushes or behind the building. There's a private stranger and then intimate partner. Repercussions look different for each type. So if it's a public figure, it's gonna look differently than an intimate partner. If that makes sense. because we know that there's different danger levels, and also it's just a different situation if you know the person and if you don't. And then public figure, that case I'm talking about, the NAU case, because she obstructed, it was a woman that was harassing and stalking online, because she obstructed justice between the firefighters. She now has 40 years because she was following public figures, and she was also following a politician. She has a great story, you should look that up. I should find more information about that. But so it looks different for each thing because it affects people differently.
Well, if you're doing that to a public group, you're affecting the whole public because they're, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, imagine stalking, and if you're, say, a politician in the county, and you have a stalker, and you have a really important decision to make, you know, who knows what decision that might be. If you have that constant thought of someone stalking you, and you don't know who that person is, and you don't have that clear mental mind, right? You're constantly thinking about other things, which is you're not able to make important decisions. And that goes with all types of stalking, but that's kind of why public figures are treated differently. Good. So I want everyone to read something stalkers do on their own really quick, and name out something that surprised you or that you didn't know.
Checking your garbage?
Yeah, so the reason they check garbage is for like bills, they can find addresses, maybe if they don't know where you work, they could find like a pay stub, something like that.
Eat, maybe how you like to play.
Yeah, drop some, say you like McDonald's.
Show up at your one, start to act like they know you are saying things in common.
Yeah, and that's also a big thing we talk about with...
about Mary. Sorry.
That's a big thing we talk about with students a lot is how easy is it to find out someone's name or where they go to school based off of what you're posting online, or maybe, what you're talking about in the community. So it's important to notice those things and not be hyper vigilant of them and protect yourself, but just be aware of who you're telling what, because you don't know their intentions all the time.
But what your privacy settings are online.
Right, but coming to cyber stalking, yeah. You want to make sure all of those are private and no one's seeing anything that they can't see. And as far as students go, I mean, adults are very different. It depends on your situation. But I tell students, don't post any pictures of you skiing at Alpine for a ski tournament. Don't post pictures of a play you were in or outside the school you're at, because pictures show where you are, and it's really easy to track that location. So if you know you're at risk for stalking, or someone that maybe an ex-partner that you're nervous about, be aware of that before you're posting it online, because you can always track it back.
And nowadays, most everything any kind of picture that gets posted online has like an automatic geotag to it that you can look up, and it's really, I went to a stalking conference in Seattle. It is bizarre, some of the things. They have apps nowadays where you can download onto your phone to learn how to find somebody somewhere. It's just so bizarre. They have tutorials on YouTube that people have put up of how to locate a geotag off of a picture that somebody uploaded. It's very scary in the cyber world, and it really has contributed to a lot that has victimized people when it comes to stalking.
Yeah.
So in you guys' experience, how often do you see this?
With students, I see it all the time. I have students that are like, this guy found out where I'm from, or like he's like, hey, do you go to North Tahoe Middle School? And I'm like, dude, because they're talking and it's posting. They're saying, hey, I'm a middle school I'm a middle school student on Instagram, and they can see that they're posting from Tahoe City. So all you have to do is go online and look up middle schools in Tahoe.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so for students, at least, because we were students, it's really difficult for them to realize what is happening and the vulnerability that's going on because of that.
For the victim side, because I work with most of victim services, I would say probably a quarter of our victims suffer from stalking. A lot of people just think it's normal. Sometimes we'll have people come through our doors, we're like, okay, this is starting to become a problem. And then we all, we figure out everything that's happened. They, let them keep track of it, and then it is starting to become a very serious problem where it's highly likely that usually stalking ends. I don't know if you've gotten to that, but it usually ends with some form of violence.
Yeah.
We integrate it into our DV education about if you ever feel like after it usually happens when they're left, right? And they still want that power and control put on them. So if you ever feel like somebody's do that, we have education on how to turn the settings off on your phone, how to be more smart when you are more cyber smart when you're posting online, things like that will kind of help be preventative towards that. But I mean, I've seen trackers on cars. I've seen a lot of stuff. It's almost bizarre. I mean, I always say bizarre, but it's very bizarre the ways that how creative they are when it comes to still having control of somebody by where they are.
So is it actually quite easy to stalk someone with today's technology?
Oh,
It's not hard.
I took I guess it was like a seminar. So in college, I ran track and played softball for the university, and we were forced when we signed on to take this seminar where we came in and they taught us how to set privacy settings, how to do this, how to do that, because it's so important to them that you represent that school positively. When we're 18, everyone's going out and partying, and so my Facebook still is you can't see anything anyone tags me in unless I okay it. Mm-hmm. You can't see anything without my permission. So it'll come to me first, and then I have to approve it, and then it'll go to my thing in which only my friends that follow me can see it. So it's there's a whole bunch of settings you can do to protect yourself, but a lot of people, even now, I have my Twitter account's completely blocked, and people still find me on there and just say, hey, how come I'm not following you? And I'm like, how do you know about me on, I didn't know, I wasn't even friends with someone and they tagged me with something, and it was the weirdest thing to me when I found out that they could see that kind of stuff. You feel you take all these precautions and they can still get to you. I don't know how they do it.
And bring a good idea of, I help advocates come up with ideas for support group, and that would be great to have a support group around cyber safety.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Because they hold classes at college for that. Wow.
Well, so it wasn't a class. It was literally all the athletes got together in the gym for 3 or 4 hours, and they just said, okay, now click this, now click that, and they showed us how to do it. And if you don't want to do it, that was fine, but if you got in trouble later, that was at your own risk kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and some of it's a lot of clicking to get to it. A lot of it's not going to be the first thing that comes up when you create a Facebook page, and there's a lot of clicking to get to those privacy settings, having that pre-approval thing. So having someone learn about it.
I mean, it was a 3-hour session, and we just did Facebook and Twitter.
Another barrier.
It was 3 hours.
And that's what Snapchat. That's how it should be set up. And I have a really hard time with students because it's up to them to set that up, and they don't know how to do that, and it should almost be reversed. When you sign up for a Facebook account, it should be blocked. You should have to go in and allow people to turn everything off instead of having
all the companies could
exactly
right. That's true. Well, and that's also something you have to think about is not only for stalking purposes is everybody can see this. You're putting yourself out there, and everybody can see it, and what's out there is out there, and it doesn't go away, and even if you delete it, it's on some database somewhere, and it's a good thing to keep in mind just in general, and especially if you feel at risk for stalking. So just for the sake of time, if you're being stalked, you may feel fear of what the stalker might do, vulnerable or unsafe, not know who to trust. So maybe if someone in your life is a survivor of stalking, if they are kind of hesitant to tell you where they live or their phone number or something like that, just keep that in mind. Something else might be going on. It's not that they don't want to connect with you. It's just that maybe they have other things going on as well. you might feel stressed and have trouble sleeping, concentrating, eating problems, flashbacks, PTSD symptoms of maybe if it was an ex-partner trying to gain that power and control back, or someone that was assaulted, something like that. And then just like that feeling of confusion of why someone else might do that. So just a couple of statistics. 1 in 4 stalking victims reported some form of cyber stalking. I'm sure it's continuing to go up as we speak. 61% of female victims and 44% of male victims were stalked by a current or former intimate partner. Again, that fear of losing power and control, finding that person's location. Let's see, more than half of stalking victims lost 5 or more days from work. That could be from either health issues that have resulted from that stalking, mental health issues, or sometimes physical as well, that forgetting to eat and loss of appetite, or just fear to leave the house, right? They don't want someone following them. Sorry, I'm going through this really quickly so we have enough time to go through the rest of it. So stalking and femicide, 76% of women murdered by an intimate partner were stalked first. Again, we talked about that power and control, taking that power and control, and that fear of losing that person is just such an intense fear, and ends with stalking and possible murder. 85% of women who survived murder attempts were stalked first. 89% of femicide victims who had been physically assaulted before their murder were also stalked in the last year prior to their murder. And then 54% reported stalking to the police before they were killed by their stalkers. What does that tell you?
The system's great.
Well, it shows how hard that is to prosecute.
Yeah,
it's hard to
think.
prove.
Yeah.
Right, think back to these statutes. I mean, how are we able to prove this to protect these people?
Are the rules to protect the victim or the perpetrator?
The victim. Well, that's,
based on that, like, I feel threatened.
then
You're
you
not
have to-
threatened. Yes, I am.
But you also have to consider it like from the other point of view too, where women go, well, he's stalking me, just to say it, because they're tired of having them around or whatever, and so it kind of does awkwardly.
So I want to talk about that
They're
for a
kind of
second.
the victim.
Yes, I want to talk about that for a second. If someone is feeling like they are stalked, or just feeling like they don't want that person around anymore, do they have the right to find services to not have that person around anymore?
Only if they've asked.
Yeah, I mean, if they're feeling safe.
It's all about how the
They feel
receiver
safe.
takes it.
Yeah, good. So I would say that the percentage of people that are coming up saying that they are being stalked when it might be just that they have someone that they don't want around anymore are very low. Kind of going back into that victim blaming section where it's, if they perceive danger, we don't know, right? And it's the same as in an intimate partner relationship. We might not see physical abuse or emotional abuse or any types of those abuse, but it doesn't mean it's not happening or that person doesn't feel victimized. So it's important to come at it from a side of believing them, even if it might seem kind of absurd, because we never know, right? We don't know, and it's if looking at these statistics of people that are saying that they were stalked first before murder, all of them are above 60%, So what we're seeing is that if someone feels like they are being stalked, they probably are.
No, yeah. I agree with you.
Okay.
I was just saying, they do it all the time where it happens a lot in colleges where it's like, oh, she cried rape. When it never
But the
happened.
percentage, I looked that up when I was
The
arguing.
false reporting is very.
It's like 1%.
Yeah,
We're gonna get a lot
very
more.
little,
Yeah.
but
Majority of not.
We're gonna get a lot more into that, I think, in 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll be back, so I'll be here.
Yeah.
I'll have this conversation. But yeah, there is so many statistics out there of false reporting, and we'll really dive into that on that.
Yeah.
And it is
Oh,
so
it is.
few.
It's so little.
What's interesting is even right now the conversation's going on at very high levels in the country. It's amazing that you have the president saying, well, you know, the accused has the right to due process. Well, exactly. What's your point?
Right.
I mean, it's completely insane. It's utterly insane.
Right.
So if a person's been accused, they have a due process they can go through. In the case of this whole thing with Rob Porter, well, FBI is pretty good due process. They actually reviewed all three of these cases and found, you know, evidence.
Right.
So the due
Significant
process is there. So it's certainly given, you know, extreme situations require extreme solutions. Right now, yeah, there's a super sensitivity, and there should be, because the incidence of this is so high. One thing that stuck out to me last week with Ashley Judd's video on TED, which is a great talk, was that there was only actually 73,000 domestic abuse victims out there. That's 0.005 of 1% of the female population. Now, how many people here think that even comes close to touching what's really going on? I mean, we're just barely seeing the tip of the iceberg now because we have a millennia of patriarchy in men, basically.
That totally.
That's what's going on.
Well, and the thing is when we say statistics for intimate partner violence and sexual assault, it is so hard to find out how many people we are missing in those statistics because our society has silenced people for so long. So it'll be interesting now that there are these new movements within our country to give survivors the chance to speak up. I'm really hoping that we see a jump in those statistics so that we can show really how much this happens. And that hopefully will kind of hammer home what everything has been talking about and really be able to give actual numbers and visuals for people that still don't believe it. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Glad we're all on the same page with that. So advice to give to the victim. So of course you want to tell them to stop talking to the stalker. Another really important one that people don't always think about, bless you, don't intervene and don't ask friends to intervene. You're putting that person in danger. If you need to intervene, call the police. That's their job. It's not your job. We want to keep everyone safe.
So yeah, I just want to interject. It was interesting when I went to the stalking training. It was through OPW, which is the Justice Department that put it on. They had an interesting take on it where they had kind of the prosecution look at it, where they would tell the victim not to cut off interference because every time they interact, like, don't change your cell phone number because then they can track it through that, which is kind of interesting because you have like the safety of the person, right? And then you have also like you want to put this guy or girl behind bars, right? And you need to, in stalking cases, you need to have records of what has happened over periods of time, proving fear, proving what intent and things like that. And so I thought that was interesting, just something to think about, that some justice departments are telling people, don't cut off lines of communication. Keep those lines of communication and just deal with it. Which is hard. It's hard. It's really hard, and it was really hard for me as like a victim advocate to wrap my head around that. I'm like, why would you ever,
especially considering the
contribute to that? Right.
When it continues.
But that's what one of the presentations was about and advice was, and I was very perplexed.
That kind of points out the failure of the system in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. That has to happen in order to prove the case.
I mean, go back to these statutes, right? We don't have laws put in place to protect victims of stalking, and so what happens is it leaves it to the victims of stalking,
to be their own police.
Right, exactly. I'm a big advocate for policy change, so when we all talk about things like that, it's like, well, this is the problem, right? But in order to help the victim make sure that they're keeping evidence, there could be ways that they do it, that maybe they send it to a friend and the friend stores the evidence. That way, you know, they're not constantly having to look at it and be reminded of it. And I think that's hard for us, especially because I think in social services, we walk in and we're like, hey, what can we do to fix it? Let's fix this situation. How can I help? But I think really it's you need to let it happen for legal process as well.
Seems like a hard thing to tell victims.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Like
definitely.
being in your guys' shoes and just be like, well, just hang in
We need
there.
10
Like,
Yeah.
what?
Well, and that's where you come in and you say, you know, if you are having issues, call me. Let's talk.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then they don't have to open it. They can come to you guys and just be like, look,
Right.
I haven't opened it yet, but it's still an issue. And
Right.
Well, how much is enough evidence? Like how many
Yeah,
times?
exactly.
So it's very interesting. Some of the tools that they have in the trainings are giving a victim a calendar and writing out each day what has happened, saving text messages, saving email conversations, and giving them like a 3-month calendar. But it's like so much can transpire in those 3 months where it could really jeopardize somebody's safety. And the whole bad thing about the law is that you have DAs telling somebody to track all of this kind of stuff, and then we could prosecute, you know, so.
But then they're getting emotionally abused, or the
Right,
emotional
it's
job
further
of
in
tracking
that.
it, and you're seeing it on your calendar, it's reminding you,
Right.
yet you can do nothing because you don't have enough.
Okay, so it says stop all contact, meaning responding.
Right. So don't shut off accounts, but keep the phone number open, keep emails open. If it's over social media, you don't have to still use that social media, but don't delete the account.
Don't block them.
Don't block them. Yeah, because that's more evidence that you could use. So this is a super important topic, and I'm sorry we didn't have that much time to go over it, but Andrew is a wealth of knowledge, so if you have questions, you
Some
will answer.
days.
Some days, right. So I just want to kind of go over some impacts of intimate partner violence. Raise your hand if you've ever brought up intimate partner violence, or, well, let's stick to intimate partner violence. Raise your hand if you've brought up intimate partner violence and someone's like, well, that's not my problem.
What do you mean?
If you've brought it up in conversation, if you've
Like
talked
it's
about,
happening to you and somebody said that to you, or like,
yeah, or maybe it's happening to a friend and you're asking advice from another friend. If you've brought up the topic of intimate partner violence, or if you're talking in the news and cases that are going on and you know there's a discussion and the person you're talking to is like, well, that's not my problem, that doesn't affect me.
Or just like doesn't know how to respond.
I've heard that conversation before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's really common that you bring up intimate partner violence, especially with the term the domestic violence. It's like, well, that's in the home. That's not my thing. Like, that's their thing to figure out. It's not my job to step in.
Yeah.
Which is kind of where I was going with that. But so just some statistics to throw out there whenever someone says that it's not their problem. So between 20 and 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lose their jobs due to reasoning stemming from the abuse, which is harmful to not only the family, but also to our community. We're losing work time, and a lot of times, actually right now, is it California that it's legal?
Nevada.
Nevada. So you are given days off for intimate partner violence, either for therapy or for services or to go to court systems. They give you time off, and that's a legal mandate. I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
how
it's a
many
law
days.
that they passed in Nevada, and you have an allotted certain amount of time off that your employer has to give you. Whether that's paid or unpaid, it's up to your employer, but at least it's time off for you to go get social service, go to court. Social services help, go to court and get help, counseling, things like that they're mandated by law to allow you to have. Normally, you would have to just change your schedule, try to take days off if you are allowed. Some people are not allowed to take days off during certain weeks because social services and counseling, they only operate between 9 to 5 normally, right? So most people's jobs are 9 to 5, except in this town, but I mean.
I just got an email from a coworker that was like, I asked for this day off to go to court, and didn't get it off. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, so it is very tough, and it's like, okay, do I go to court or do I keep my job? You know, so
Right.
I mean, it's very struggling. So that's great for Nevada.
Yeah.
If California could do that would be awesome.
I know it's another barrier to put up on like.
It seems, that's funny because I feel like it would have been the other way, like California would have done it first because
I
it's
know.
so progressive, you know?
That's why I always think it's California.
Yeah,
Well, is it Nevada because there's higher cases of domestic violence?
I don't know if there is higher cases.
Well, yeah, there
I
is.
think
Nevada's
it's just
been-
okay. So I sit on like a legislation group for Nevada,
Well,
and,
Nevada's
and
been
what it's
number
just
one
the
in
climate around Nevada, right? There's the political climate is a lot different in Nevada than it is California. I mean, they're almost like night and day, kind of. And so a lot of different coalitions. We work Tahoe Safe oh my gosh, Tahoe Safe Alliance works with the Nevada Coalition to help strengthen domestic violence law, to help strengthen sexual assault violence laws, things like that. And you know, always lobbying helps, things like that. If you can call your representatives and that stuff really helps.
Yeah,
because
California, there's a lot more.
there's a lot more
issues.
people. I mean, when you think about Nevada, there's only 2 metropolitan areas, and that's
Right.
Las Vegas and Reno, and that's where like 75%, or I think they say 90%, some number around there of the population is. Everything between that is rural Nevada. Like, then I mean like Wild West rural Nevada.
Like one
And,
bar.
and Jessica,
Yeah.
to time on to what you were saying, up until last
Yeah,
year, Nevada was the number
Mexico,
one state
same.
for homicide related to domestic violence cases. So Nevada, I think we're now number 3, but for the longest time we were number 1. So it is
Yeah.
a big thing in Nevada.
Right.
I think Alaska's number 1,
Yeah.
based off of population size and ratio to it, but
Per capita.
yeah, per capita, that's what we saw.
Okay, so the point is you lose money not only if it's paid time off, the community's losing money, the company's losing money. If it's not paid off, your family's losing money. Mental health issues, PTSD, depression, anxiety, even going more into mental health is, you know, abuse, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, eating disorders, all of the different repercussions that you use for coping, unhealthy coping methods. So community and society, the none of my business thing, healthcare costs. There's an absurd amount of healthcare costs that are going into domestic violence crimes. Intimate partner crimes.
Specifically through the ER.
Right.
So what happens is people go to the ER. ER costs are through the roof if you go to the ER. And most victims go to the ER saying, and it's interesting, they're not saying that they're victims of domestic violence, but they may have fallen, been pushed, things that don't indicate that. But we have, studies have shown that the ER costs have really affected our healthcare and the cost of that because of domestic violence. And it's really good to get those kind of people, the hospitals on board this way using these statistics. It's like, hey, if you help us combat this, you won't have to focus so much on it,
Right. So overall, the cost of intimate partner violence exceeds $8.3 billion per year, with medical, loss of wages, missed work, the finances you have to use for community health if you are experiencing mental health issues because of the violence.
And that's in 2003. It's 15 years ago.
And that's
Oh, really?
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Probably
Yeah,
20
it's
billion.
definitely probably.
30 billion.
Thank you for pointing that out. We should update that. Yeah, it's probably continued to grow. So really quickly, I want to end with a relationship equality wheel. We want to end on a good note, right? We want to. Anybody have one?
Shared responsibility.
Okay.
Trust and support.
Trust and support.
I was gonna say that one too.
Trust and support. Trust and support.
Mine's communication.
Honesty and accountability.
Honesty and accountability.
Yeah, I like the trust and support.
Trust and
I
support.
like listening non-judgmentally.
Good.
I like the independence and autonomy.
Yeah, definitely.
I like all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Have the high school students choose and they're like, can we have all of them?
Yeah.
Yes.
Make me one with everything.
Exactly.
Which would you plead?
Right. And then go ahead and flip it over and it says rules for fighting fair. There's also a relationship checklist, but we're just looking at rules for fighting fair. and choose one that is hard for you and something that you need to work on.
I mean, you might be like in that tension with your partner.
Do you have one?
Yeah, consider taking a break if
Yeah,
things
me too.
escalate.
Good, yeah, and that's something that's a lot of times is hard in a partnership I know my partner is just like this all the time. It's like, let's talk about it now. We have to talk about it now. I'm like, I'm not really ready to talk about this right now.
Come on.
Yeah, he's like, we've got to solve it right now, which really, sometimes that's not the time to solve it. Sometimes you need to step back and really think about it. Okay.
I circled it right when you said.
Anybody have anything different?
Mine is deal with only one problem at a time. Sometimes I have a challenge not bringing up the fact that he didn't do the dishes 5 days ago and we didn't talk about it. So focusing on just like the one problem and not bringing up like all the problems that have happened over the last month that we didn't talk about.
Mine for me is defining yourself, not your partner. That I language, those I statements. I tend to put my partner in a box, and it's really important that I don't do that, and it's something that I acknowledge, and he will not let me know that I'm doing that.
You focus on the problem, not the person. Try not to take it personally.
Yeah, definitely. And that can be hard when you're talking about something that is kind of personal, but just knowing that you're in a partnership and you want the most for each other.
One thing that Bonnie and I, not that we have a perfect relationship, but we've been together an awfully long time, like 45 years. We actually use humor and we have alter egos. So when we get into a trust, I'm Billy Buck and she's Emily Lou.
So cool.
And so it's interesting if you watch your alter egos fight, you really just start laughing. You go, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? I mean, it works pretty good for most sides.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And you get to make it up. You get to add love right there.
There you go. So it's an activity too.
Yeah, it changes the whole energy field. Like when things get a little too tense, you can go, come on, Billy Buck. Shut up, Billy Lou.
Don't make me come over there now.
That is funny.
Oh, that is great.
Anybody have anything else?
Mine is focus on the present and don't bring up past argument.
Yeah.
I think be happy in this present. Don't forget the past.
Right. Yeah. I'll even bring up like an argument we had that we solved, and I was like, I'll bring it up and I'll be like, yeah. And when he's like, we already talked about that. I'm like, I know, but I just want to talk about it again. Yeah. Right. So the reason we end on this is that we acknowledge that not every relationship is going to be in that honeymoon phase, right? And we have healthy and unhealthy characteristics of regular relationships, right? And so it's how we are able to get to that holistic relationship where you do have bad times, but you're able to get to those good times. And really what we like to hammer home is communication and talking through it and working through whatever's going on. All right, that's all I have.
Cool. And